Good evening, and welcome to News of the World. It's Tuesday, July 21st. Tonight we drift slowly across 28 countries, from Argentina to Greece. There's nothing you need to do and nowhere you need to be. Settle in and let the world turn. Argentina has come home from a World Cup final that didn't end the way they'd dreamed. Spain took the trophy, winning their second World Cup after defeating Argentina in the final, and for Lionel Messi, who wasn't with the squad, the loss carried a particular weight. He thanked his country and said the pain was immense, words that land hard in a nation where football is woven into the sense of who you are. His absence added another layer to the disappointment for fans who had hoped for one more perfect chapter. In Buenos Aires and beyond, supporters searched for consolation where they could find it. Some took pride in having beaten England along the way. Los Ingleses, as the fans called them, a small comfort on a night when the bigger prize slipped away. There was also an aftermath FIFA is now examining. After Spain's on-field celebrations, clashes broke out between players from both sides, and the governing body has opened an investigation. It's a bitter footnote to a match that mattered so much, and it tempers what might otherwise be remembered as a hard-fought contest between two proud footballing nations. But here's what stays. If you're still with me, a country that lives and breathes this game will carry the ache for a while. Messi's words, honest, unguarded, will echo in the quiet. Football gives and football takes, and Argentina knows both sides of that better than almost anyone. The night will settle, as nights do, and there will be another match to play. Belize has joined a regional public health network called Red Fets, part of a wider effort across the Americas to strengthen the foundations of public health. The step came during a seminar organized under the Pan American Health Organization, focused on what are known as the essential public health functions. The core responsibilities that hold a health system together, the everyday work of protecting populations and ensuring care reaches the people who need it. For a small country like Belize, sitting between Mexico, Guatemala, and the Caribbean Sea, participation in these regional networks matters. Health systems don't stop at borders, and neither do the challenges they face. RedFASP connects countries working to make their public health functions more permanent, more institutional, not dependent on a particular crisis or a particular government, but built into the architecture of how a country cares for its people. The seminar where Belize joined was about exactly that, turning good intentions into structures that last. It's the kind of news that doesn't travel far from home. No crisis prompted it, no emergency demanded it. But it's the quiet, deliberate work that holds a health system up over time, shared agreements and standards, relationships between neighbors who understand that health is something they carry together. And so Belize steps into this network, adding its name to a regional conversation about what public health can be when it's built to endure. Bahrain is a small island kingdom in the Persian Gulf, and these days the sound of sirens has been crossing it. Iran, according to reports, targeted civil aviation navigation systems here, the invisible infrastructure that guides aircraft safely in and out of the country's airspace. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has said it struck American military facilities in Bahrain, part of a wider wave of attacks that also reached Kuwait and Jordan, following U.S. strikes on an Iranian nuclear site. For people on the island, the sirens were real. The targeting of aviation navigation systems would have rippled outward, flights delayed, rerouted, grounded travelers waiting in terminals for word that couldn't come quickly enough. Bahrain hosts a significant American military presence, and that has placed it in the path of a conflict it didn't choose. Even the Formula One Grand Prix, a fixture of Bahrain's international calendar, has been ruled out for now. The organizers decided the moment wasn't right. The U.S. Coast Guard has moved some of its fast response cutters away from Bahrain toward the Western Pacific, a quiet reshuffling of ships that tells its own story. What stays is the ordinary life of the island, the call to prayer, the causeway traffic, the heat off the water in the evening. Conflict passes through, but it doesn't define the whole of a place. Tonight, Bahrain is still there, still itself, even with the sirens fading. Malta sits in the middle of the Mediterranean, a small island nation with a faith that runs deep. For centuries, Marian icons have held a special place in the religious life of the Maltese people. These images of the Virgin Mary are not just artwork, they are woven into the identity of the place. You find them in churches, in homes, in village squares. They are carried through streets during feasts. They are turned to in times of trouble and in times of thanks. The word legendary attaches to them for good reason. Some are said to have origins that stretch back centuries, their stories passed down through generations. Whether they arrived by sea or were painted by local hands, each icon carries its own history. What matters to the people who venerate them is not always the provenance, it is the connection. Malta is a country where the sacred and the everyday sit close together. The island's churches dominate the skyline of nearly every town and village. The feasts that mark the summer months are as much about community as they are about devotion. In a world that moves quickly, Malta's relationship with these icons is a reminder that some things are carried forward not by force but by quiet, steady faith. And on a small island with a long memory, that kind of devotion still finds its way into the rhythm of ordinary life. Sudan carries the scars of war in its soil long after the fighting moves on. These days, one of the quietest efforts underway there is the clearing of explosives, the remnants of conflict that stay behind, hidden in fields and along roads, threatening anyone who walks there. The HALO Trust, an organization long practiced in this work, has been engaged in Sudan, where the land itself has become dangerous. It's the kind of story that doesn't make much noise. No dramatic images, no sudden turns, just people methodically going over ground inch by inch, making it safe again for the families who live on it. In a country where so much of the news is urgent, sanctions, accusations, drones, this work happens at a different pace, slower, steadier. It asks patience, and it offers something quiet in return, the possibility that a path might simply be a path again. The conflict in Sudan has drawn the world's attention for many reasons, and rightly so. But underneath the headlines, there are people doing this careful work, clearing what war has left behind, one piece of ground at a time. And when the noise of the larger story fades, that may be some of the most important work there is. Mozambique's northern province of Cabo Delgado holds a story of quiet endurance. Over 900,000 people there need humanitarian aid, a number that speaks to years of displacement and uncertainty in a region many listeners may not know well. Cabo Delgado sits at the country's far northeastern edge, where the Indian Ocean meets the Tanzanian border. It's a place of coastline and forest, of communities that have lived off the land and sea for generations. In recent years, conflict has pushed families from their homes, sometimes more than once. They've left behind fields and fishing boats, schools and neighborhoods, the small, ordinary architecture of daily life. Aid organizations are working to reach those in need, providing food, shelter, and the essentials that hold a community together. But the scale of need is vast, and it outstretches what's available. What's striking is how patient people are, how they carry on, helping one another where they can, waiting for a stability that has been slow to return. The story of Cabo Delgado isn't a loud one. It unfolds in shelters and temporary settlements, in the decisions families make each morning about how to get through another day. And if you're still with me, let that sit for a moment, the persistence of people far from the world's attention before we travel on. Slovakia has been keeping a secret from the 2nd century, and archaeologists have only now brought it into the light. Somewhere in its soil, they've uncovered a Roman military camp dating to the time of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome from 161 to 180 and who spent years of his reign campaigning along the Danube. These were the Marcomannic Wars, a series of conflicts between Rome and the Germanic tribes pressing against the empire's northern frontier. The frontier ran right through what is now Slovakia. What makes this find unusual isn't just the camp itself, it's the burials. Legionaries were found in pits, not in the orderly graves you might expect of Roman soldiers, but in a way the archaeologists describe as strange. Armor was left behind too, still resting where it was abandoned. Something happened here that didn't follow the usual script. A sudden attack perhaps, or a retreat that left no time for proper farewells. If you're still with me, picture that frontier 18 centuries ago. The Danube was Rome's edge, and beyond it lay territory Rome wanted to hold but never quite could. Marcus Aurelius wrote parts of his meditations in military camps along this very river, reasoning with himself about duty and endurance while war dragged on outside his tent. Now the soil has given back what it held. Soldiers who vanished from the record have been found again, still wearing the evidence of their last hours. It's a quiet kind of remembering, the kind the earth does on its own schedule, long after anyone thought to ask. Türkiye's roads are changing, quietly but steadily. Electric and hybrid vehicles have been tightening their hold on the country's auto market, a shift that feels less like a sudden turn and more like a tide coming in. For years, gasoline and diesel engines ruled the highways, the long runs between Istanbul and Ankara, the coastal routes down toward the Mediterranean, the mountain roads eastward. Now, more and more drivers are making a different choice when they buy. You can see it in the showrooms and feel it in the traffic. Charging stations are turning up in places where a few years ago you'd never have thought to look. Shopping mall, parking lots, highway rest stops, city curbsides. The change doesn't announce itself. It just accumulates, one purchase at a time. What's striking is how ordinary it all feels. This isn't a story about spectacle or sweeping decree. It's families deciding what to drive next, businesses updating their fleets, a market moving the way markets do, following costs, following preferences, following the quiet logic of what comes next. Türkiye has long been a country of car makers and car buyers alike, with factories that build vehicles for drivers far beyond its borders. The road ahead is still being written, but if you listen carefully, the hum under the hood is starting to sound a little different. Eswatini sits between South Africa and Mozambique, a small kingdom where much of the population lives far from city hospitals. In the rural areas, health monitors have been carrying digital handheld devices, small tools that fit in a hand to track immunization. The idea is simple: know who needs a vaccine and make sure they get it. Immunization gaps are a quiet problem in many parts of the world, and in Eswatini, where distances and limited infrastructure can make healthcare hard to reach, those gaps can persist without anyone noticing. So the monitors walk the paths between communities, devices in hand, recording and following up. It's a blend of old-fashioned care, someone showing up, and new technology that keeps the records straight. The work is unglamorous. It won't make headlines the way a crisis might, but it's the kind of steady effort that changes a community over time. One child, one vaccine, one visit at a time. If you're still with me, picture those monitors walking rural roads in the late afternoon, the kingdom's hills around them, doing the slow work of closing a gap that most people will never know existed. And maybe that's the point, that the best kind of progress is the kind you don't notice, because it simply becomes the way things are. Saudi Arabia finds itself looking seaward these days, toward the narrow stretch of water where the Red Sea meets the wider world. The Houthis of Yemen have declared a naval blockade against the kingdom, saying they intend to block Saudi shipping at the Red Sea gateway. It's a serious claim, one that reaches beyond the long conflict between these neighbors and into the currents of global trade. The Red Sea is one of the planet's great maritime arteries. Oil, cargo, and the daily traffic of commerce pass through these waters, and any disruption there sends ripples far beyond the coastline. The announcement has drawn attention from oil markets and governments alike, each one weighing what a blockade might mean for supplies that the whole world depends on. For Saudi Arabia, this is a familiar kind of pressure, but the scale is different. The kingdom has spent years navigating the complexities of its southern neighbor's war, and now the threat has moved to the sea, to the routes that carry its oil and its trade out into the world. The Houthis, backed by Iran, have shown before that they can reach across the water. What remains less certain is how far this declaration goes and what it will mean in practice. These are the kinds of tensions that build slowly, watched quietly by people who know the region well. For now, the ships still move, the markets still calculate, and the Red Sea keeps its ancient silence between two shores that have known each other a very long time. Suriname finds itself at the center of a quiet energy shift, one that its neighbors are watching closely. These days, the country sits alongside Guyana as part of a developing oil boom along the northeastern shoulder of South America, a stretch of coast that not long ago drew little outside attention from the wider world. Now, Curaçao is looking east across the Caribbean with plans of its own. The island is pursuing an ambitious port expansion strategy aimed at capturing some of the commercial activity that Suriname and Guyana's offshore oil discoveries are beginning to generate. It's a reminder that when energy is found, the ripple travels far beyond the country doing the drilling. For Suriname, the interest from Curaçao is both a compliment and a signal that the world is beginning to map this corner of the continent differently, to take it seriously as a place where things are moving. There's no single dramatic moment here, but there's something steady underneath, a small country finding its footing in a changing energy landscape and neighbors recalibrating old relationships to meet new possibilities. Even quiet booms redraw the map, one port, one partnership at a time. Cape Verde, a scatter of 10 islands off the west shoulder of Africa, spent part of this summer doing something few expected. At the 2026 FIFA World Cup, the national team went on a run that people are still talking about. Not a loud run, not the kind that comes with predictions and pressure. More like the kind that quietly gathers, match by match, until suddenly everyone is watching. Commentators called it historic. Records fell. And in the long catalog of superlatives that always follows a World Cup, Cape Verde kept appearing, alongside names you'd expect and a few you wouldn't. For a country of around 500,000 people, spread across volcanic islands in the Atlantic, simply reaching the tournament was remarkable. What happened after was something else. The pride traveled far. In West Palm Beach, Florida, a Cape Verdean fan spoke to reporters about what it meant to see his tiny nation hold its own on the biggest stage in the sport. It's a familiar feeling for diaspora communities. The distance collapses just for a moment, and the islands feel close enough to touch. What lingers isn't only the results. It's the image of a small country stepping into the light and refusing to be a footnote. Fox Sports said you have to include them. People magazine placed them beside Messi. And somewhere in Cape Verde on warm evenings, kids will remember the summer the world learned their name. Italy has long been a country that builds things that cross water, and this week, one of its shipbuilders received a notable order from across the sea. Portugal will buy 3 frigates built by Italy's Fincantieri. The announcement came from Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, a deal between two nations that share a coastline and a sense of the sea's importance. Fincantieri is one of Europe's largest shipbuilders, with yards along Italy's coastline, places where the work has been passed down through generations. A frigate is a naval vessel, versatile and fast, built for patrol and protection. 3 of them, shaped in Italian waters, will eventually sail under the Portuguese flag. For Italy, it's the kind of news that doesn't always reach the front pages, but it matters in a quieter way. It means work for the shipyards. It means Italy's industrial reach extends well beyond its own borders. And it's a reminder that this country, so often celebrated for its art, its food, its ancient cities, is also a place where steel is bent and welded and launched into the sea. There's no fanfare around it. Just the steady acknowledgement of work to be done, and a partnership between two countries looking out at the same stretch of water. Estonia these days is making room for something new in its energy landscape, a combined biogas and biomethane plant, the first of its kind on Estonian soil. The German company Envitec Biogas is behind the project, and for a country that has long thought carefully about where its energy comes from, it marks a quiet but meaningful step. Biogas and biomethane are both drawn from organic matter, agricultural waste, food waste, the kinds of leftovers that usually go unused. What makes this plant notable is that it does both, producing biogas which can generate electricity and heat, and biomethane which can be cleaned up and fed into the gas grid or used as vehicle fuel. It's a small but practical kind of circularity, taking what would otherwise be waste and turning it into warmth, motion, light. Estonia sits on the northeastern edge of Europe, a small nation with a long memory of energy dependence and a clear interest in building homegrown alternatives. A plant like this won't transform that picture overnight, but it adds a piece to it, another option, another thread in the fabric. If you're still with me, you might picture it as a steady industrial hum somewhere in the Estonian countryside, doing its quiet work, and that feels like a good place to rest for a moment. Maldives has opened its first shark research center, a quiet but meaningful step for a nation whose life has always moved with the ocean. The islands sit scattered across the Indian Ocean, barely above the waterline, and the seas around them hold some of the richest marine life anywhere on Earth. Sharks have been part of that world for longer than people have. Reef sharks gliding along the drop-offs, whale sharks drifting through the channels, the steady patrols of predators that keep the whole system in balance. For a long time, in many places, sharks were something to fear, or to catch, or to sell. That has been changing slowly in waters like these. A research center says something more than protection alone. It says we want to understand. It means people will watch and count and track and learn how these animals move between reefs and open water, how the populations are faring, what they need. In a country where almost nothing rises far above the sea, attention to the ocean is not a luxury, it is survival, and it is identity. And somewhere in the warm, dark water tonight, the sharks are doing what they have always done, moving, feeding, keeping the reef alive while on land. Someone has decided to pay closer attention. Belgium's national football team will soon be looking for a new voice on the touchline. Rudi Garcia, who guided the side through a World Cup campaign that carried them to the quarterfinals, is stepping away when his contract expires at the end of the month. It's the kind of departure that arrives quietly, not in the wake of failure, but after a tournament run that asked something of a team and got something back. Garcia took charge with the weight of Belgian expectations on his shoulders, as any coach of the Red Devils must. The quarterfinal finish wasn't a triumph, exactly, but it was a showing, a team that competed, that stayed in the fight, that gave their supporters reason to keep watching deep into a tournament. And now the chapter closes, the way these chapters do. A contract runs its course, a coach packs up his notes, and somewhere in Brussels or Bruges or a village pitch in the Ardennes, a young player who watched those matches wonders what comes next. Belgium has been here before, of course, the business of moving on, of finding the right person for the next cycle, the next set of qualifiers, the next summer. It's the rhythm of international football, steady as a metronome. For now, Garcia's work is done, and done with some dignity. The Red Devils will regroup, and the road, as it always does, will stretch out ahead of them. North Macedonia has been keeping a secret under its soil, one that goes back to the 4th century before the Common Era, when this land sat at the crossroads of a powerful kingdom. Archaeologists working at a site called Gradiste have uncovered what they describe as a rare Hellenistic ritual complex. What makes it remarkable is what it tells us about the people who gathered there. This wasn't an ordinary settlement. The evidence points to elite feasts, gatherings where the powerful ate and drank and made offerings, bound together by ceremony. The finds connect the site to the wider Macedonian kingdom, the same realm that would soon produce Alexander and reshape the known world. If you're still with me, picture it, a cleared space perhaps with fire and food and wine, important people arriving with purpose. The rituals of a society that understood power as something you performed, not just something you held. What's striking is how these old stones still have something to say. North Macedonia sits on layers of history, Roman, Byzantine, Ottoman, and older still. Each excavation peels back a layer and reminds us that this land was never a footnote. It was a place where things happened, where kingdoms met, where people gathered to feast and mark their place in the world. The work at Gradiste continues. There will be more to tell, no doubt, as the soil gives up what it has held for so long. For now, it's enough to know it's there, another thread in a very old story, still being woven. Singapore is preparing for a change at the top of its judiciary. Chief Justice Sundaresh Menon, who has held the role for years as the country's most senior judicial officer, is set to retire. Named to succeed him is Sushil Nair, a respected figure in Singapore's legal community who previously led the prominent law firm Drew and Napier. It's the kind of story that might not travel far beyond the region, but in a country that takes quiet pride in the steadiness of its institutions. This particular handover carries real meaning. The Chief Justice in Singapore is more than a title. It's the person who shapes how justice is administered, how the courts function, how a society places trust in its own rules. Menon has been a steady presence in that office, and his departure opens a careful transition. Nair arrives from private practice, from the advocate's side of the courtroom, where you build arguments rather than weigh them. That shift from lawyer to judge is one many in the profession will understand, and for a place that has built so much of its identity on order and reliability, a smooth succession at the highest court is its own kind of reassurance. If you're still with me, you might sit with that for a moment. A small nation, a quiet changing of hands, and the machinery of justice turning forward once again. Mongolia is hosting a visitor from far to the west this week. Emomali Rahman, the president of Tajikistan, has begun a state visit to the country, a meeting between two nations that don't often make each other's headlines, but share more than you might think. Both sit in that vast belt of land between great powers, places shaped by mountains and grassland, by trade routes old and new. Tajikistan, high in the Pamirs, looks south toward Persia, and west toward the old Soviet sphere. Mongolia, open under its enormous sky, looks between Russia and China. Neither country is large in population. Both carry the weight of history lightly, in their own way. What the two leaders will discuss hasn't been spelled out in detail, but state visits like these tend to move quietly along familiar lines: trade, infrastructure, cultural exchange, the patient work of building ties between countries that don't share a border but share a region. Mongolia has been widening its diplomatic circle in recent years, reaching out to Central Asian neighbors, looking for partners beyond its immediate giants. There's something restful about diplomacy like this. No crisis drives it, no deadline presses. Two leaders sit down together, and somewhere in Ulaanbaatar, the protocols unfold, the handshakes, the toasts, the careful language of communiques. It won't reshape the map, but it reminds you that the world is full of conversations you never hear about, between countries finding each other across the steppe and the mountains, one visit at a time. St. Lucia, like much of the Caribbean, lives close to the water and the soil, close enough that protecting the land and protecting a way of life can be the same thing. This week, an environmental and agricultural foundation on the island received a grant of $13,500 for an eco-project. It's a modest sum by some measures, but on an island where farming and environment are stitched into daily life, it lands where it's needed. The details of the project are still taking shape, but the intent is clear enough to tend what's here, so that what's here keeps tending to the people who depend on it. St. Lucia's coast meets the Atlantic in a long, restless line, and inland the terrain rises steeply into rainforest and farmland. It's a place where sustainability isn't an abstract word. It's whether the soil holds, whether the reefs survive, whether the next harvest comes in. Foundations like this one work in that narrow, practical space between policy and the ground, often without fanfare. A grant like this won't travel far in the headlines, but it keeps a few people working, keeps a few acres cared for, keeps the old connection between land and community a little more secure. And on a night like this, that feels like enough. Quiet, local, rooted in the kind of care that doesn't need a spotlight to matter. Angola sits at a familiar crossroads these days. The country is talking openly about building an economy beyond oil, even as high crude prices are what's powering its current rebound. There's something honest in that. The oil still matters, still pays the bills, but the conversation has turned toward what comes next. And what comes next is taking shape in concrete ways. Angola has signed port deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars with Chinese firms, including a terminal at Barra do Dande to be built and operated by China's Huatong industry. A Chinese tuna company called Pingtai Rong is planning a substantial investment in Angolan waters. A young entrepreneur named Ribeiro Tanguna is quietly building the country's digital commerce future, one transaction at a time. Even Angola's September crude loadings are being held steady, a small signal of stability in a volatile market. So the story here isn't a dramatic break from the past. It's more like a slow turning. A country using the resources it has to build the things it hopes to depend on less someday. The oil funds the ports and the platforms and the fishing operations that might in time stand on their own. If you're still with me, that's worth sitting with tonight. A nation writing its next chapter with the tools of its current one. Kenya is quietly stitching together an electric charging corridor for long-haul buses, and this week the first piece clicked into place. At Athi River, just southeast of Nairobi, the fuel retailer Rubis and the electric bus company Basigo opened a public fast charging station. It's the first of 4 planned sites, a small beginning, but one meant to let electric buses travel farther than they ever have on Kenyan roads. Basigo has been building battery-powered buses for Nairobi's streets for a while now. The challenge has always been distance. A bus can do well in city traffic, but point it toward another town, and the question becomes where to charge. That's the gap this corridor is meant to fill. Rubis brings the locations, familiar fuel stops where drivers already pull in. Basigo brings the vehicles and the know-how. Together, they're trying to make electric mobility practical, not just for short hops, but for the longer routes that connect Kenyan towns and cities. It's easy to overlook a single charging station, but every shift in how people move starts somewhere small, a place where a driver can stop, plug in, and know they'll have enough to carry on. 4 stations won't transform a country overnight, but they might be enough to prove the road is possible. Costa Rica has long been a country that thinks carefully about its relationship with the natural world. This week, it cleared a legal path for Recope, the state petroleum company, to move beyond oil. It's a quiet headline, perhaps, but a meaningful one. Recope has been part of Costa Rica's energy story for decades, the entity that refines and distributes fuel across the country. To move beyond petroleum is no small thing for a company whose identity has been built on oil. The legal clearance suggests Costa Rica is serious about diversifying its energy future, something the country has been working toward for years. Costa Rica already draws most of its electricity from renewable sources, but transportation has remained the harder puzzle, the place where old fuels have lingered. A state company being given room to step away from petroleum feels like a piece of that puzzle shifting. What comes next isn't clear yet. Transitions like these are slow, full of logistics and difficult choices, but there's something settled about how Costa Rica approaches these questions, not with drama, but with steady intention. The legal path is cleared. The direction is a little more visible than before. Andorra sits high in the Pyrenees, a small country of valleys and mountain passes, and for a long time its people have looked beyond their borders for certain kinds of care. This week brings word of a quiet but meaningful change. A new mental health center in Les Seu d'Urgell, just across the border in Spain, will set aside 44 beds exclusively for Andorran patients. For a country of Andorra's size, 44 beds is not a small gesture. It means that when someone needs a place to stay, to rest, to be looked after properly, that place exists and is theirs. Mental health care has long been one of those things that small nations handle through cooperation with their neighbors, and Andorra has always depended on arrangements like this with both France and Spain for specialized treatment. What feels different here is the word exclusive. These beds won't be shared or negotiated case by case. They're set aside, reserved, and there's something steady in that. The idea that a country, even one tucked between 2 larger ones, can plan for the well-being of its people in concrete terms. If you're still with me, you might sit with that for a moment. A mountain country, thinking ahead about care. The lights in the valleys dimming as the night settles in, and somewhere just across the border, rooms being prepared. The Netherlands has always had a particular relationship with the sea, not hostile, exactly, but negotiated. For centuries, the Dutch have held back water, claimed land from it, learned its rhythms, and in 2011 they tried something quietly remarkable. Instead of trucking sand to the coast every few years to repair what the tides wore away, they deposited 21.5 million cubic meters of sand into the sea in one enormous pile. Then they stepped back. The idea was simple. If counterintuitive, let the wind and the tide do the work. Let those forces spread the sand along the coastline over the next 20 years, reshaping it slowly, the way nature would have done if left alone. It's a kind of patience that doesn't come naturally to engineers, and maybe that's what makes it impressive. Rather than fighting the sea on a fixed schedule, they gave it material and trusted the process. If you're still with me, think about what that requires. Not just technical confidence, but a willingness to let go, to place something enormous in the water and wait. These days, as coastlines around the world face rising seas and harder storms, that Dutch experiment sits there in the North Sea, doing its slow work, no fanfare, just sand, moving the way sand moves, becoming something new. Chile has declared a state of emergency in 2 of its regions after flooding took the lives of at least 5 people. The storms came hard and fast, and the water reached into places unaccustomed to it: homes, roads, the small mining operations that dot the north. More than 600 small miners there now wait to see what the water has left behind. It's the kind of weather that reminds you how thin the margin can be between an ordinary week and a devastating one. 5 people lost, each one a life held by family, by community, by plans that won't now unfold. If you're still with me, it's worth holding that for a moment. The same weather system has buried the mountains in snow, 12 feet, and counting at the ski resorts. It's not a footnote. It's a measure of how vast this storm has been. Snow that skiers will celebrate, falling from the same system that brought grief to the valleys below. Chile knows weather. It stretches along the edge of a continent that gives it deserts and glaciers and everything between. But these days, the weather has asked too much of the people living in its path. The emergency crews are out, the regions are under formal alert, and the country waits for the water to recede, so the slow work of rebuilding can begin. Australia is quietly having a record year for renewable energy. According to PV Tech, 9.1 gigawatts of new renewable generation and storage connections reached full output in FY26, the highest figure the country has recorded. That's a substantial addition to any national grid. For perspective, a single gigawatt can supply hundreds of thousands of homes, depending on the source and the conditions. So 9.1 is not a marginal adjustment. It's a meaningful shift in how Australia powers itself. What makes this milestone worth noting is that it includes storage as well as generation. Solar panels and wind turbines only produce when the sun is out or the wind is moving. The ability to store that energy, to hold it until the evening peak or through a still, cloudy stretch, is what turns intermittent sources into reliable ones. So the fact that storage is part of this record suggests the transition is maturing, not just growing. Australia has long been known for its fossil fuel exports, coal and gas shipped to partners across Asia. Domestically, though, the country has been working to remake its own grid. This milestone, recorded in the financial year that runs through June, is one measure of how that effort is taking hold. Records are just markers on a longer road, but this one suggests the road is bending toward something new. In Greece, there is a mountain that has held many titles across a very long time. Mount Olympus is the country's highest peak. It was, in the old stories, the seat of the 12 gods, the place where thunder was forged and destinies were argued over. And since 1981, it has carried a quieter designation too, as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, protecting the rare plants and wildlife that cling to its slopes. But there is one title it has been waiting for, and the waiting has gone on for 12 years now. Mount Olympus has spent the last dozen years under consideration for World Heritage status, the recognition that a place holds value not just for one country, but for all of humanity. You might think a mountain with this much history would have been recognized long ago. The myths alone could fill a library. But World Heritage status asks something different. It asks whether the mountain's natural and cultural significance rises to a global standard, and that case has to be built carefully, examined slowly, and decided by people who weigh many places against many others. So Olympus waits. The clouds still gather around its summit in the afternoons. The hikers still come up through the pine forests in summer. The gods, if they are there, have been patient for far longer than 12 years. And perhaps that is the quieter story here. Not the waiting itself, but the steadiness with which a mountain carries all its meanings at once, ancient and modern, sacred and scientific, and simply, grandly itself. And that's the world for tonight. Wherever you are, whatever tomorrow holds, rest easy. The world will keep turning slowly while you sleep, and we'll take another quiet trip around it tomorrow night. Good night.